Hey everybody, Edo here, and I am excited because I don't have one but two designers here. I've got Danny Devine and Steven Aramini. Guys, say hello.
How's it going?
Now, you guys often collaborate on designs and prototypes, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have one official co-design as far as the title, but like pretty much anytime we are prototyping or playtesting, we're bouncing ideas off of each other.
Right.
Yep.
So you work together, and so I've met and often talked to you guys together, and you both have really interesting design stories. And just to start it off for people, Danny, you started in sort of the designer to Kickstarter track, right? Not as a creator, but as a designer.
Correct.
And that was with Mob or Mobsters. What was the first one you did?
Mobtown.
Mobtown. And after Mobtown, you did Ghost with Candy, right?
Yep, Ghost Love Candy was the second one.
Ghost Loves Candy, that's right. And that's a crazy story because like the campaign went bankrupt and like all sorts of weird things after the fact. Nothing to do with you. Your design was great, but something else happened, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, the publisher of Ghost Love Candy and Mobtown went bankrupt, so that game was in limbo for a bit.
But it's in stores. How's it no longer in limbo? What happened?
That's because the awesome people at Steve Jackson Games picked it up. It turned out that one of the people that works there is actually a backer, and I was contacted shortly after the announcement that the company went bankrupt. And they picked it up, and they developed it a little bit more, and it just hit stores this month.
Awesome. I mean, it's such a cool, like I know it was not a good, bad thing happened, but so cool of Steve Jackson to come in and pick it up, and both for the backers and for the design. And so, but then after you've done these Kickstarters, you start sort of doing this thing where you're making your own print and plays and showing them off, and they're getting found on Twitter. Like, tell that story a little bit, because I think it's really interesting for new designers.
Yeah, after kind of I read some blogs and heard from people like Daniel Solis and Grant Rodiak, who just talk about sharing their games and just being open about it. And I got really involved in the Twitter community, and so I just started sharing what I was doing in progress, and I was getting interest from people that wanted to test it. So I started developing it into a print and play, and that's actually resulted in two of my games getting picked up from publishers because they've seen my posts and other people posting, just playing the print and plays that I've made.
And I think we should talk about that philosophy for a second, because it's very counter to a lot of the approach many designers have, right? Many designers are like, I don't want anyone to know about it. It's super secretive. I need an NDA for you to play test, like sort of all the way over. And some are in the middle where they'll play test and tell people about it, but they're not like throwing their files up to anyone to download and doing it on Twitter. But you've found, it seems, through sharing and being open with your work, good things have come of it, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I get where people are coming from, because it's not the way to go in a lot of space. Like, my day job is working in slot machines and casinos, and we keep all of our secrets as
You're not posting that online,
possible.
or someone's knocking on your door the next day.
Yeah, exactly. And then I would say, video games, inventions, and stuff. A lot of people don't share it. So at first, when you're first getting into design, you're kind of afraid to. You're afraid that someone's going to steal your idea, or they're going to take it and you're going to get nothing out of it. Right. And it's really not the case. There's more ideas than there is time to make them.
Yeah, it's for a dime a dozen for the ideas. It's the execution, right?
Yeah.
But so I want to shift over to Steven. But so you're sort of a different story, Steven, because you're like Mr. Contest.
Yes.
So little did you know that in addition to just sharing stuff on Twitter and print and play and getting publishing jobs, there's actually a fair amount of contests that you can enter to get your designs going. Can you sort of take us through the different ones and groups you've done those contests with, Steven?
Yeah, so the very first contest that I entered was called the Ion Award, which was with SaltCon, which is a convention near Salt Lake City. And I entered that, and it won. And so I was approached by a publisher that was for Yardmaster, and that ended up. And I actually entered that, and that had basically final art in it. which
Did you do that art yourself?
No, that was a friend of mine who did the graphic design.
Great graphic
I have
design.
no art skills. Unlike Danny, see that's the other thing with Danny is he'll post these things on Twitter, but they look awesome because he's also a graphic designer.
Yeah,
so
that is true.
I don't have that. That luxury.
Yeah, Danny, it is. I have to, for just not to mislead anyone, Danny's in that category of awesome designer and often awesome graphic designer, and so he does have some nice things to show. But let's keep going with you, Stephen.
So anyways, I did have that Yardmaster in it, and it got signed and got published, and then right on the heels of that, I basically discovered the Game Crafter, which is a print-on-demand website. And every quarter they do a contest, and it always has like a limitation. So
like a theme or a number of components or that kind of design limitation, you mean?
Yes, right. Exactly. So like one of them was called the Screw Challenge, which basically you were required to use these little plastic miniatures. And then another one was the Trick Taker Challenge. So you had to create a game that used the mechanic of trick taking. So I had entered 2 of those contests, and I actually won both of those, and was approached by
shark here.
Well, it's hard to like that's why I'm hooked on the contest, because I enter them and I'm basically rewarded for my efforts. So it's really satisfying. But so in the case of the Trick Taker, the judge of that offered me a contract, and then through Letterman Games, he wasn't a judge in that contest, but he was just sort of watching the contest. And so I met him through that, and that's sort of roundabout how Groves came about.
And I actually think this video will post after the Grove Kickstarter ends, but that's been a very successful Kickstarter, right? I think it funded. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's up right now. Like you said, retroactive. It'll be gone by the time this airs, I guess. But yeah, it's doing well, and so yeah, my route has been contests for by and large. The one exception to that was Barker's Row, which I had met Brian Hank from Overworld Games at a proto spiel, and just kind of got a chance to show him the game, and he liked it and signed it that way. So that one I kind of got in through the proto spiel.
So yeah, so a combination here of proto spiel, print and play, contests, these sort of grassroots design approaches, right? Both that hit Kickstarters, but also other major publishers, right? So it's very, again, grassroots is perhaps the best way to say it, but approach to getting design and getting games made. I want to take a quick aside or plug even for the Jen Kant Roll and Write contest. I happen to be a judge. If you guys are submitting, don't tell me anything. But but that's an awesome contest that's going to be happening leading up to Gen Con. Gen Kant is a convention for those who can't make it to Gen Con, and the prize there is Beth Sobel is going to do the art for the project. So that's awesome. But so if you don't know about that, I'll find a link in the review or in the video, and we'll do that. Okay, but so you're a ringer in contests, and you're rocking in print and plays. So I think what would be cool to talk about for people who watch this channel and think about this is, so you guys have sort of done this grassroots thing, and you're leveraging these printing, whether Drive-Thru Games does print and plays. You mentioned Daniel Solis, there's a number of designers who go that route. The Game Crafter, Twitter, and all these. Like, if a designer wanted to take your approach, sort of get out there and sort of not just jump right into trying to pitch to publishers, though they can, of course, but actually do this more organic print and play, sharing, get feedback. What are your thoughts? What should they keep in mind, and what's maybe some advice on how they can do well and leverage it?
You want to go first? I think at the heart of it is like the reason why we make games is just because it's fun, So we're, we aren't really doing it to publish the games, and I think as a result we've just kind of like, let's just make the games we want to make, and then just kind of put them out there for the public to sort of consume, and I think just good things have come in return, and so I think at the heart of it all is just like,
make the game you want to make, and then hopefully you'll find an audience for it. We aren't really necessarily seeking like the biggest, most prestigious publisher or trying to, submit to Days of Wonder or whatever. It's like, we're by and large, we're kind of working with smaller independent publishers and stuff. But I mean, for me personally, I won't speak for Danny, but a lot of it has, and I think to you to an extent, but it's like the publishers have come to us because they've just been like excited about the projects. And so we'll just kind of strike up a conversation and we'll just be like, yeah, you guys sound excited about it and we're excited about it. So it's just like, it's just nice to kind of find people in the community that are excited about the projects and want to move them forward, which for us, it's nice as designers because, as you know, as a publisher, the logistics and all
those other
crap
pieces
that goes with it, that's like the part that to me is not enjoyable. Like the part of it that's enjoyable is developing the game and designing the game. Mm-hmm. So it's nice to kind of just make those connections in the community and then be able to move on to the next design. So I guess the takeaway I'd say is just be really involved in the community and just like kind of put out the game that, you kind of are passionate about, and hopefully it'll attract others that can share in that passion.
And there's something, for lack of a better word, pure about that, right? It's sort of, here's the designs, here's what we like, here's what we enjoy, here's what we find fun, and people who can self-select to play it, check it out, download it, print it, right? There's a little bit of a buy-in to print and play, right? Unless, or you're buying it from the GameCraft or something. And, that it seems like that tight group gives good feedback and also is, maybe a couple steps away from a publisher or somebody who is a publisher or a Kickstarter creator, that kind of thing. I mean, what are your thoughts, Danny?
I was just going to emphasize what he was saying with the community. Like, I kind of like you had mentioned earlier about just like putting your stuff out there, getting involved in one of the many board game communities, whether it's a local thing, like I found Steven through a mutual friend, and we've been, designing and playing each other's games ever since we met. Or getting online, there's, Board Game Designers Forum, there's Board Game Geek, or I love Twitter. That's like the board game community on Twitter is just fantastic. And just getting to know people in the industry, getting to know people that would be your customers or your consumers, I guess, not customers, but you know what I mean? Like,
sure.
I've just found being involved in the community to be a really rewarding and important part of the design process.
I have to agree with the rewarding part, and I think, when you're in a community and you're maybe just in the community, but and reading, it might not seem rewarding, but as you start contributing one way or another, whether it's giving advice or making games or doing a video or whatever, you really feel that you're adding into the pool, and the pool is growing because everyone's adding to it. And it, it's a little hard to describe, but as you start to do it, it's like giving feels good when you keep on giving and it's growing, right? And so
right.
I definitely, I know for my part, have found that being part of the community and contributing and helping really is rewarding. I have to agree with you. Stephen, on the contest side of things, because, it is your specialty, how, and I don't know, I haven't asked you this question, so I don't know the answer, so hopefully maybe it is the simple one, but, when you enter a contest, do you just, wrap it up quickly and, chuck it in, or do you, how much iteration and time do you put towards your game, your contest-winning games? Is it a good answer where you're like, no, I work on it really hard, or you just, throw them over the fence? What's that in your process?
Well, I mean, obviously all contests have a deadline, so you have a timeline that you try to work backward from. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's kind of contests are interesting to me for two reasons. One is the deadline, because it sort of forces you to complete a project as opposed to just procrastinate and never get something done.
Sure.
So I like having that deadline because it's you sort of have to go, okay, by this time I have to have sort of the basic building blocks and the foundation. And by this time I have to have, it really kind of gelling. And by this time I have to have it ready to be able to play test and so on and so forth. The other thing is that like you had mentioned, all contests pretty much have a limitation. And actually that helps me as opposed to having just this open sandbox of just I can do anything. But if it's like, okay, I know I have to make a game that's a trick taker that has to fit in a box this big, that has to be done in a month. So I know my limitations, and it actually helps focus my attention more so that my brain doesn't kind of overload with ideas. It just kind of makes me go, okay, this is an idea. I'm going to just run with it.
And so, but as you're going through that process, so one thing you're saying, just in a contest, up front, you look at you find out what the deadline is. You work backward. You clearly know the phases of your development. What's important? Hey, this is when I'm doing ideation and concepting. This is when I sort of have to lock down. I have to begin playtesting. This is when rules are writing. And so, So I assume again, you're playtesting your games, right? Like when you go to a contest and you're working on something, whether it's Danny or your local game group, is it fair to assume that you're actually getting that game time on the table for people to play it?
Yeah,
I can answer that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like Button Shy contest, another contest that we had entered. We entered that one as a co-design. So, I mean, that's a great example.
And you won.
And we won that one, yeah.
Just checking in case maybe that wasn't the case.
That was for Circle the Wagons, which that one's crazy because it's 18 cards, so you have to make a game out of just 18 cards. But that one, that's what having a co-designer makes all the difference in the world. Almost all of my games have a co-designer because I just, I think it just makes it so much easier to pass it into their court for them to work on or kind of get their take on it, and then they give it back. You can get together and collaborate, and I think you kind of start to see each other's, what's missing from the equation, and then the other person can kind of fill it in. But I don't know if that answers the question.
To answer your question,
no, I mean I think it. I mean,
lots of playtesting, yes.
Yeah, lots of playtesting. I mean. It's sort of rambling at times, all these videos, but I think what I was trying to, I think it's important for people to recognize that if you really want to win a contest or win a contest regularly,
Right.
that, you need to treat it like a formal, you need to really treat it like a serious development project where you're actually play testing it, getting feedback from other people, not just, this Gen Cant isn't the first contest I've judged, and I've seen work that it's sort of like, has anyone else ever seen this before me? I don't think so. And you can tell the projects that have more, it's almost like an unfair advantage. It's not an unfair advantage because you're just working, but spending time on your development, passing it around, getting feedback, refining it, just means you're handing over a refined submission rather than the last version you finished that, again, no one has ever seen. So, I mean, I sort of assumed that could have been the only way you were doing so well, and is that you work hard and you plan it and you do a good job. But maybe you were just going to say, no, I'm a savant and I just vomit on the plate.
First design out of the chute. It's always perfect.
It's always perfect.
Yeah. We actually meet up probably a good 3 to 4 times a week, and if we're not playing a real game, which is rare, a real game meaning a finished game, right? We're playing each other's prototypes, and as far as the contests go, I mean, I don't think you don't really submit that until there's it's that last week, right? We're pushing that until the last.
Oh yeah, always for sure.
It's not something contest, and then I do it in a weekend and submit it. You take that time to test it as much as possible, and you submit it when you feel like you've got the best you can in the time limit.
Totally. Well. We're coming on to the 20-minute mark, which is about where I like to hold these. It's been super interesting talking to you guys. When you think about, again, new designers coming into the space or just design in general, is there any particular piece of advice or learning that each of you have had, starting with Danny, so there's no confusion, Stephen? Is there any advice you like to give to new designers, or you just in generally give to a designer?
You got to just, you got to put yourself out there. You got to be willing to step out of your comfort zone a little. You can't just have you can't just show your mom the game because she's going to love it. My mom loves all my games.
It's impressive she can play them. I mean,
but you got to be, not everyone's used to being, going to a convention or finding a gaming group or trying to find someone new that'd be willing to test your game. But I mean, you really have to be willing to put yourself out there and find people to talk to about your design, or it's really not going to develop and not going to get better.
For sure. That's great advice. Steven?
I would just say play lots of games, because every time I play a game, I walk away from a game with like, that was a cool mechanic. I'm going to have to put that in the back of my head and see if there's a way I can twist that into a new game. So there's so many good games out there, and a lot of unique mechanics and mashups of things that are going on. So I would just say, and we're, kind of guilty. We were actually just talking about it yesterday. It's like, man, we got to step away from just playing our own prototypes and play more just like games, because the more games you play, the more ideas are going to come to you, and the more you're going to realize just how big the gaming world is. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, I that is advice I completely agree with. I think I made a short video specifically about that advice. And for me, doing the review channel has been like this like awakening, because I like have to play tons of new games. Like I used to be susceptible to like sort of having a favorite and be, hey, let's play Small World again. Like, let's play. I've got every, and having to go through this just load and load and load. I mean, back here it was, all the next, it's stacking up all these games to play, and it really does give you taste and appreciation and perspective on what's fun, what's not, what works, dynamics, mechanics, all those things. So, I mean, I agree there too. So yeah, guys, thanks for being on. This was my first interview with two designers at once. So a little crazy.
Got us both in frame, which is good. It took a little work.
Yeah, and we're gonna
going in and out a little bit.
Yeah, it's all right. People will deal with it. But thanks a ton, and hope everyone enjoyed and make some great games.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, bye.